Firstly, I want to start this video by saying no, contrary to popular belief, I do not hate Oscar or even think he is a bad driver. For some reason, there is this perception that I hate Oscar and think he is a garbage driver who isn't deserving of anything, but that couldn't be further from the truth. I, like many others, found it disgraceful how Piastri wasn't on the grid in 2022 after a fantastic F3 and F2 campaign. He is a serious wheeler as proved in his rookie season in 23. While he did have his issues in race management, he demonstrated clear pace and the ability to contend with his teammate on his day. Really, Piastri seemed like he was going to have a bright future, but all of this changed in 2024. Now, he didn't fall off or become some horrible driver. Instead, McLaren became supremely good and the leading team in the sport. And like his teammate Lando Norris, this new attention did bring to light his strengths, but also his weaknesses. His race management was being put on blast since yes, there were some races where he was great like in Hungary and Spa. However, there were also plenty of races where he needed his strategy changed mid-race and not for a good reason. This was especially prevalent in the last 6 rounds since if Ferrari were going to win that year's Constructors title, it would be because Piastri wasn't there with Norris in the high up places. Except for Brazil, sorry I'm going to keep mentioning it. So heading into 2025, the general consensus was that Piastri is a real baller, but he needs more time to fully hone his craft and then he could maybe become world champion. But something happened that we didn't expect. The year starts and after a disastrous first race on home land, by the way, Oscar went in China and then in Bahrain and then in Jeddah and then in Miami, and soon enough he was leading the title. He would continue this great run of form all the way to the summer break, where in Zandvoort it seemed like it was set in stone. Norris had an engine failure, and with that, Oscar was leading the title by 34 points. All he needed to do now is keep it cool and at least just be on the podium every race, but I am stating this in the past tense. In Monza, he was outraced by Lando, and then in Baku, he crashes twice in the weekend in a horrible showing. In Singapore, he got bitched by Lando at turn 3 and couldn't re-overtake him despite Lando's damage. In Coda, he was literally nowhere, and again in Mexico, he fucks up quali, which puts him nowhere for the race. In the span of 5 race weekends, his 34-point lead became a 1-point deficit to Norris, and to many, this is a mystery. How could one fall off so quick? It's strange, right? Some say he's being purposely compromised by McLaren because they favor Lando. However, I have my own theory that I wish to present to the class, because all along Oscar's winning periods, I have repeatedly said this wouldn't last forever and all we need to do is wait. And what's happening now? It didn't last. Sure, he can still win the title, but I doubt he's going to unless he takes a bit of my advice. So go join the Discord to debate Formula 1 and subscribe if you're new if you like pastries. So enough yapping and let's get to quacking.
A good weather for a race, but especially for a talk.
So before I discuss what this theory is, we need to set the groundwork for the basis of it. Let's start by separating his season in two, his highs and his lows, which I feel like is the only relevant information, and then we will try and make connections between the two. So his first high this season was obviously in China. After a horrible start to the year, Oscar needed to do something magical if he wanted to not be seen as a fraud, and he did just that. From the moment he started his first practice run to the final lap, Oscar showed immense pace and was able to ultimately dominate that race. However, there is a but. It was actually Lando who showed pace to win at first. However, like many such cases this season, he fucks it all up because of vibes or something. Now, I'm not calling this weekend fraudulent for Piastri, especially because it was a sprint and Lando never bounced back, but what I am saying is, Oscar does have competition and winning like this will not be easy. His next good moment of the season would be in Bahrain though, and as we know, this performance would start a chain of great performances from Piastri. Oscar, from the moment he started his practice runs, again dominated the weekend, and this time, that was all him. Lando was close in pace in theory, but Oscar was ahead and was always going to win this one no matter what. But luckily for him, he could never find out given Lando's battle in qualifying and his race start. Guess that's why he needs a tape. And then in Jeddah, it was another win for Oscar, but Lando again was close and even ahead in pace, and the only reason why there wasn't a fight between the McLaren pair was again bottle for Lando. Oscar did however have competition in this race in the form of Max Verstappen, who of course needs no introduction. Max qualified on pole at a circuit where the McLaren was the fastest car on the grid, and Oscar, seeing this, did something no one expected. He got his hands dirty. He employed Max's #1 gimmick of sending a dive bomb and pushing the outside car off the track, which binds them. They either concede the position or they get penalized. I think this rule is stupid because, I mean, come on, I think it explained itself. But alas, it's in the rulebook and Oscar did what had to be done against Max. Had that never happened though, I would imagine Max would have kept the lead and won this race, but I'll return to this point. Anyways, next up is Miami, of course, which I'll keep short. It was another case of Lando barely showing greater race and quality pace, but again, not converting it, not even because of a bottle, but because of something else. Oscar has, in my opinion, one of, if not the greatest racecraft and overtaking ability on the grid. He can overtake in such a variety of ways, and magically, he never gets damaged. Sidetracking a bit, Max in Mexico sent a dive bomb on Lewis, and it looked horrendous as usual with Max's dive bombs. It was literal stupid racing that should have been a penalty. However, when Oscar did a move that was similar to Max's, Oscar got by with zero damage and zero controversy whatsoever. Both cars defended similar as well, so Max really has no excuse. But going back to Miami, in the main race, Max was again on pole, and when Oscar caught up to him to overtake, Oscar dummied him and got the switch back off. Lando, on the other hand, he was stuck behind for so many laps because Lando, in a total opposite to Oscar, has some of the worst racecraft on the grid. So Oscar was able to win, not because of Lando bottling, however some may see it as bottle regardless, but because he simply has much better racecraft. I love how I said I'd keep it short and then it ended up being the longest portion. Anyways, his next tie was in Spain, where I'll actually keep it short. All weekend long, Lando and Oscar had very similar pace, so it was close, but ultimately, Oscar still won that race even with the late safety car, so yeah, not really lots to talk about. Belgium would also be yet another great weekend since Lando was actually faster all weekend long, but before Lando could even bottle, Oscar was ahead of him first and would go on to dominate the Belgian race with Norris. Also, did you guys remember that this Grand Prix was a sprint? I genuinely forgot. Finally, his final high of the season, I would say, was of course in Zandvoort. This is another case of Lando being faster on pace, but not converting it to when it matters, which allows Oscar to take the pole and the win. And the sweet cherry on top for Norris, his engine failed, and now Oscar had a massive 34-point lead in the standings, and with 10 races to go, I doubt it'll shrink. But lo and behold, you are watching this video, so obviously something went wrong. So let's detail his lows of the season. Now, thankfully for him, he does have less lows, but where his wins weren't really that consecutive, when Oscar has lows, they're almost always consecutive, which I see as a horrible thing. Anyways, his first low of the season was, of course, the very first race. Now, throughout the weekend, actually, he was slower than Lando and everything, but still fast enough to contend with him even through the rain, and a second place would have been great regardless on home soil. However, we know what happened. The rain started to come down harder, and on lap 30-something, he goes off the road along with Lando, but where Lando is able to keep it on the road, Oscar goes sliding off and gets beached on literal grass. He is able to get out, though he was virtually out of the race, and while he did also manage to recover to 9th, he could and honestly should have been on that podium. It also put Norris at risk of Max overtaking him. That would not have happened had Oscar simply stayed on the road. However, luckily for him, his next low wouldn't be for a while, since next up is Imola, where he was pretty bad. I mean, he got third, but keep in mind, he started on pole and had pace over Norris. He immediately lost the lead heading into turn 1, and sorry, if that move happened to me, I would just retire. He proceeded to get hounded on by Norris, and where there was a safety car, he got behind Lando since he opted for track position, which was ironic, given he lost the position, whatever. So not a good showing, but he did just win 3 back-to-back, so this is excusable. However, what isn't is the very next race in Monaco. All weekend long, he had zero pace. If he was even in the Ferrari, Red Bull, or Mercedes, he would not have been higher than 5th and 6th, and no, I don't think that is crazy to say. He just couldn't get a good lap together, which allowed the likes of Charles to be ahead of him. Lando, who made no mistakes that weekend, was able to finally convert his pace to a win, and his pace was nowhere near Oscar's. This was a horrible weekend for him, and thankfully, he did bounce back in Spain, but for Canada, yikes. Now, in fairness, Lando was behind him since in a shit weekend he was shittier, which of course culminated in that crash, but I'm not faulting Oscar for this. Where I am faulting him, however, is the fact that he couldn't even get on the podium. Kimi that race wasn't even that fast, yet he was able to snatch Oscar's chain and stay in third the entire race. Try clean air, dirty air all you want, but the pace difference between the two did not warrant the result. But if it's any consolation, this may be a bit harsh since I'm unsure if this should even be a low placement, so let me know your thoughts. Anyways, his next low was a couple of races later in Britain, and this one is not harsh at all. Oscar was able to be super ahead of Lando in the interchangeable conditions, and he was set for a fantastic showing. However, he threw it all the way under safety car, where he braked so unreasonably hard that it could have caused an accident for many guys behind, and it did nearly. He was rightfully penalized for a dangerous maneuver, and when he served his penalty, Lando was now ahead. Instead of Oscar now locking in again, he decided that his pace should just plummet and couldn't make a single inroad on Lando anymore, which led to his win. Oscar even asked the team to swap about to place his bag, citing unfairness, but Oscar, just drive faster. Seriously, it's not complicated at all. This is my opinion, his lowest low of the season, but fear not, it gets worse. In Hungary, it was actually a good weekend for Oscar right up until race day. In qualifying, Charles decided his Ferrari will be fast or else, and he was able to get on pole. Race day comes, and given all the data we have, McLaren should be able to get ahead relatively easy and win. However, Oscar decided to tailgate Charles the entire race, and it would have ended like that had it not been for good old Ferrari fuck-ups. So Piastri's leading now, right? Nope. Lando, who had a shit start, was so shit he got placed on a one stop, which ended up being the fastest strategy. Okay, but Oscar has a staggering 15-lap tire life delta and should be able to catch up and win, just like Lewis in past years, right? Nope. Oscar was really desperate to get ahead, and an unusual showing. He was impatient, kept making mistakes behind Lando, and even sent a very unreasonable dive bomb. But Lando would have his engine DNF in the next race, so Oscar's in the clear now, right? Oh boy. I'm not going to list off the next 5 races since I already did that in the intro of the video, so if you need to be reminded, go rewatch that section. But to be fair, I don't know how anyone could forget that 5-race stinker run. So what the hell just happened? He was great, and yeah, he did have his few bad races, but to completely crumble after what seemed like the blessing of every god there is, what happened? Well, I believe 2 things. McLaren had been slightly outdeveloped, and Oscar is succumbing to pressure in a way that Norris never did. Firstly, McLaren have been slightly outdeveloped, but it doesn't mean they are slow. That car has always been wicked quick, but their strongest suit was their tires and clean air ability, and since now other teams have caught up to them while McLaren has thought developments for a while, the drivers cannot rely on the car so much anymore. If you look back at most races, when a McLaren is in traffic, it looks like a hog. It's not bad, but it's not as smooth anymore, and I know that's the case with every car, but more so McLaren. They built that car to lead, and when they lead, they completely disappear. Compare that to how they are in traffic and how the drivers need to use their skill more, which gives them the illusion that they're having extremely poor form. And speaking of illusion, when they're leading out front, they're given this illusion of dominance, since again, that car loves clean air and is so optimized for it that it makes the driver seem like they are actually leading by 20 seconds on full merit and talent. That's why in a lot of races this season, the McLaren drivers are like 15 seconds ahead of everyone else, but both cars are like 2 seconds apart. Guarantee if you swap the positions of both cars, doesn't matter who, little would change. That car loves clean air and absolutely hates dirty air. Basically, the car is not very indicative of the driver's talent, since when the car is in a situation it's not built for, the drivers struggle more and it paints them as worse than they actually are. However, when the car is in a situation it is designed for, it paints the drivers as more skillful than they actually are. Lando's 30-second lead in Mexico was very impressive, but if that car wasn't so optimized for clean air, he still would have won, but not by 30 seconds, nowhere near it. And if Lando was in Oscar's situation, guarantee you he would have had an almost identical race to him. I say almost though, since secondly, we have the pressure getting to Oscar. All season long, I pointed out how Norris is faster than Piastri generally, but is not winning because Lando is also a serial bottler. But look at this, Lando hasn't bottled in a long while and is now getting the results he should have. Pair this with how Oscar is bottling now, and we're seeing the tables completely turn. When Oscar was winning and Lando was bottling, Lando was still able to use his pace to at least stand on the podium. Now that Lando is winning and Oscar is bottling, Oscar doesn't have the pace that Lando had to fight back to the podium and is getting far worse results than Lando ever got. And Oscar knows this, which is why I would imagine in Brazil, he will either win or at least be ahead of Lando, or will again finish in like 5th, 6th, or 8th. The truth is, I don't think Oscar ever had the pace to be champion this season and was mainly just picking up the pieces that Lando kept dropping. I still think he would have won a couple of races and certainly be in like the top 3 of the standings, but to win it, he just never had the pace. He isn't being compromised by McLaren, he's being compromised by himself by setting that unrealistic expectation in the early season, and now he doesn't have Lando behind to study his pace. He is alone and needs to just lock in and drive faster. Oscar is a good driver, he has it in him to certainly be champion one day, but he is still far too inexperienced to nab it now, and if he does win it this year somehow, one thing is for certain, the chance for another will never come again, even if McLaren build another championship winning car next year. Unless Lando starts bottling again, which I wouldn't be surprised. So those are my thoughts on Oscar. Truly, I hope he can bounce back. He has a lot of talent and skill that needs further refinement, so if he does lose out this year, I hope he could come back and not let this season ruin his talent. I think he could bounce back, especially because next year will be new cars, so let's hope that next year Oscar can get his pace and inconsistencies sorted out. Anyways, I want to give a quick shout out to all members of the flock for the continued support. Make sure to donate for more cool benefits as well as just helping me out. Anyways, if you enjoyed today's video, make sure you leave a like and subscribe since it really helps me out. Make sure to let me know in the comments what you think of this. And as always, have an amazing day.
Good weather for Jack.